Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel and today's video. So the Swedish word of the day is murder, which is in Swedish mord. Mord. So today, I guess, or I hope you can see by the title anyway, I'm going to cover my first ever true crime case, which is insane. I never thought that I would end up here, but you guys know I love true crime. I watch it all the time. Like, I watch more true crime videos than I watch makeup videos and such, and I talked about this in my last Get Ready With Me. I'll link it up here and in my description box in case you want to go ahead and check it out. But I talked a little bit about a case in that video, and I talked a little bit with you guys about true crime and so on, and you guys said, like, go for it. Maybe you can do your makeup and talk about a case at the same time. And then you also told me to check out Bailey Sarian, which I did, and oh my god, I love her. She does the same thing. Like, she does Get Ready With Me's at the same time she's talking about a murder case or a crime case, whatever it is. I'll go ahead and link her down below as well, because she's such an inspiration and so freaking beautiful. But that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get ready while talking about my first ever true crime case. So I of course want to do a couple of disclaimers. I am going to talk about a death on a little kid and maybe even sexual assaults. So if you don't like that, then I would not check this video out. I won't leave any gruesome pictures or anything on this. I might leave a picture on the people that we talk about, but not on any gruesome pictures like of wounds or anything of that sortment. Also, this case that I'm going to cover is so hard to research, and I will get into that in a little bit, but just so you know, this was not an easy case to research, and this is the Swedish case of Kevin Hjalmarsson. If you're new here, you can hear that I am Swedish, and if I mispronounce something or whatever, I know that you guys love to point that out in the comments, but if you feel the need, then please do so. Otherwise, you know why. I also want to point out that I don't mean any disrespect to anyone that I'm going to talk about, especially not any of the victims, so just keep that in mind. I'm just doing this to educate you, and yes, I'm not going to talk about the products that I'm using in today's video, so I'll link all of the videos, or I'll link all of the products that I'm using down below. Also, I am a little bit nervous, so I have my fan on because when I'm nervous, I get warm. So, okay, let's get into it. So this case took place in a Swedish town called Arvika, and this is 1998. And we usually have a saying in Sweden that is, oh my god, I love summer, it's the best day of the year. Then you kind of know that we don't have long summers. And this was sort of that sort of year. We didn't have a good summer. 1998, it was just cold and rainy, but August 16th was such a beautiful day. The sun was out and everyone was outside. Some people or some children jumped in the water even though they weren't allowed to by their parents. So it was just like such a gorgeous day, and people were just really in good mood and enjoying their day. Then nighttime came and Kevin was found dead by his grandpa. Kevin was 4 years old and his last name is Hjalmarsson. He was laying on a pallet by the reed. Of course, he immediately called 911, or in Sweden we call 112. The ambulance was called 20 minutes past 9 at nighttime, and when the ambulance arrived to the scene, his grandma had wrapped Kevin in a shirt, I'm assuming it's one of her shirts, and was also giving him mouth to mouth. In the ambulance they also tried to resuscitate Kevin, but it didn't have any effect, or it didn't work. So they arrived at the hospital, and of course this continued at the hospital, and relatives and friends to Kevin arrived at the hospital, but then also the police. And the police asked the family, like, what happened? So the police came, and I think that that is because it was regarding a 4-year-old boy, even though they didn't expect any crime or any like foul play. The police was still called. As I said, it was regarding a 4-year-old kid. So yeah, they just wanted to know who had been watching Kevin, like how could this happen, what happened. But no one had really missed Kevin, and no one had really thought about Kevin. When I read that, I was like, that's strange. But you know, things happened. Maybe there was some form of miscommunication or whatever. I'm pretty sure that the family has beat themselves up over this in the past couple of years, so please don't write any like mean comments about that in the comment section, because I feel like they have probably suffered enough and they would probably blame themselves for this. So I don't feel like we need to add any fuel to the flames. Maybe Kevin was outside playing with friends. I think it's important to remember as well that this was 21 years ago now. So as much as we want to say otherwise, but it really was a different time. I was allowed to do things that I wouldn't allow my kids to do. I don't have any kids, but you know what I mean. So yeah, just be respectful in the comments. I guess that I wouldn't do this story if Kevin would have woken up. So of course we can know that Kevin was pronounced dead. And the police then went in to photograph Kevin's body. I don't know if this is something that you normally do. I don't really know. But they went in to photograph his body and they could see that he had wounds on his neck, but then also on his genitals. That was kind of when they started being a little bit suspicious. But so they went and sent his body to have an autopsy, but then they also went to the scene of the crime just to lock it down so that no one could come in there and ruin the evidence. So of course in the beginning they thought that Kevin had died from drowning, but the autopsy said that he had died from suffocation, and the wounds that he had was a result of him being sexually assaulted. So now it was determined that this poor young little boy, I'm sorry, it's not funny at all, had been murdered. His life was ended way too quick. The autopsy also said that he hadn't died from, you know, someone being strangling him with their hands, and he hadn't died by being suffocated with a rope or something like that around his neck, but it was more of like a harsh object being pressed against his neck. So of course the police started suspecting pedophiles. Since the sexual assault, like of course they are going to look into pedophiles, which they started doing, but nothing came of it. They didn't come anywhere with it, so they were kind of stuck. But what they could determine was that, as I said, it was some sort of harsh object that had been pressed against his neck, and they believed that that was probably a stick that the person had found on the ground. They could also determine that the boy had been killed by a jetty, by the water, and then been moved from the scene of the crime to this pallet. When the pedophile trace didn't give them any leads, it didn't really lead to anything. They started to suspect children. Don't ask me why they started to suspect children. As I said, this was a really tough case to cover, but they did. I think that maybe it was because of the fact that there were a football field very close to the jetty and to the scene of the crime. So there were a lot of kids playing in that area. So maybe they thought that, okay, a kid might have seen something, or a kid must have done this. Anyway, they started to interrogate children to see if anyone could tell them something, or if they could just get some new information. But they couldn't really get anything, and they started to suspect that the children were lying, and they even accused them of being liars. But about a week after the murder, they took in a little boy. He was 5 years old and he was best friends with Kevin. And then they started to interrogate him. And then the 2nd November 1998, the case was officially closed because, and I know that I'm jumping very fast forward now, I'm taking a big step into this interrogation or into this investigation, but I will get to that. But they could confirm that his best friend this 5-year-old little boy with his bigger brother, his older brother, who was 7 at the time, had killed Kevin. How they came to this conclusion, I do not know, but the kids confessed, and they were 100% sure that they had their boys. They even said that the same night as Kevin died, they had run home to their parents telling them that Kevin was laying by the jetty by the water. But the parents said no, and they told the police that they were out fishing with friends. Maybe they did it just because they wanted to protect their boys, which I can totally understand. But now, the reason why the case has been so hard to investigate or even to look into is because of the fact that these were, as I said, a 5-year-old little boy and a 7-year-old little boy. And since the kids were minors, in Sweden you cannot be convicted unless you are 15 years old or older. So they actually did not leak the investigation, or they didn't let the public see it. They couldn't go to trial, or they couldn't do anything. So in the law's eyes, these 2 boys were just suspects, because they couldn't, as I said, you cannot go to trial and convict a 5- and 7-year-old little boy. And also, since they were so young, they wanted to protect their identities. So by leaking the investigation, of course, their names are going to be on there. So they never leaked the investigation. They never let the public see it. They only told the public that the case was now closed. They had their 2 boys. They had now closed the investigation, and the public had their answer. They never said who did what. They never said anything. They only said that they were sure that the boys were guilty and that the boys had confessed and that they could tell everything that happened that day and that night. So I just went off camera to do my brows. So this is a very strange situation because I don't really know how to feel about it myself when thinking about it. I mean, the case is closed. We have our killers. Kids kill kids, like it's just, I don't know. But I mean, it's hard for me to think, like, what kind of punishment do I think that they should get, and should they even get a punishment? So I should actually end the video right here. And if I had done this video 3 years ago, then I would end the video right here telling you that we don't know anything about the boys today and so on, but we do know more about the boys, and I will get into that right now. So 2014, a Swedish journalist, which is called Dan Josefsson. We say Don, but I'm gonna say Dan in this video because I'm speaking English and it feels wrong. I don't know, but Dan anyway was a Swedish reporter, and he got a tip from someone who said that he should look into the case, because what they could see was that the police had more than 15, or they had only 15, or not only, they had 15 interrogations with the boys. And if you are like me, you're thinking like, okay, so what? That is honestly what I thought, like, what's the big deal in that? But apparently that is way too many interrogations for these 2 boys. Looking into this, too many interrogations can lead to false confessions. So Dan gets this tip. It takes him 2 years to start look into this case. And he does some digging, as journalists usually do, and he gets the phone number to the family. And he ends up calling them and talking to the dad. And the dad says, like, you know, I don't think that my boys want to talk with you. And he says, no, and I respect that. I just have some questions about the case, because I feel, how can 2 young boys do this? Like, how can a 5- and 7-year-old do this? It doesn't make any sense. And the dad was like, yeah, I've always thought about that myself, but it's ultimately up to them. But he promised that he would talk to the boys and they would let him know if they decided to continue to talk to him or not. They took their fair time to think about this. They took 5 months to think about this. The boys did not remember killing Kevin, and they said that their entire life they had been taught not to talk about this because their parents had said you are not allowed to talk about this. They didn't talk about it at home either, because if they talk about it and this gets out to the wrong people, we all know how criminals treat other criminals who have done something bad to a kid in jail. They usually get raped or murdered or tortured. Like they're brutal to these people. So the parents just wanted to protect their boys, and they had always said that we are not allowed to talk about it. So the boys ultimately didn't have a lot of memory from this time. So they said, like, think about this for a minute, because this can really hurt you. What if this doesn't give us the answer we want? What if this actually gives us the answer that we don't want? What happens then? They said, like, think about it, and they really thought about it. And as I said, they took 5 months going back and forth thinking about it, but then ultimately they decided to do it. So now these 2 young boys, who are now 2 grown-up men, had names. So the 5-year-old little boy, his real name is Robin, and his older brother was called, who was 7 years old at the time, was called Christian. But for the sake of this video, I'm gonna say it with an English accent, so Robin and Christian. So as I said, let's rewind. Kevin gets murdered. We found Kevin's body. A week later, Robin tells his dad and his stepmother that he had seen Kevin get killed. When he says this to the parents, they get scared, because what if the murderer saw Robin? What if he saw him and Robin is next? Because he doesn't want Robin to identify him. So they take him into the police, not only to protect him, but to share his story and tell them what he had seen. Now, again, this investigation was secret to the public, so no one could see it. But they had their ways, they had their connections, so it got leaked. They leaked it to this reporter. Someone, we don't know who, someone leaked this, and every conversation that they had, like every interrogation, was filmed. So now we could see the film, and there is a documentary about this that I will link down below. It is in Swedish. Maybe if you're not Swedish, you can see it with subtitles. Maybe if you are Swedish, like, look into it, because I don't think there is so much time left on it. So I would recommend you guys to go ahead and, if you're interested in the case, to watch the documentary, because they take up so much there. So keep in mind, we as a public, we don't know how Kevin was murdered. We don't know what happened to him. We have no idea. We have no clue what happened. Of course, we all think that he drowned or someone drowned him. So at this investigation, or in this interrogation, Robin is in the room with his stepmother, and there is this woman interrogating him. And she asks, how do you murder someone? And he says, you take a knife and you put it to the stomach. He also says that he had told his brother this on the day of the murder. So he had come home after he had seen Kevin get murdered and told his older brother Christian that, and told him what he saw, which we could see in interrogations later on with Christian, that he confirmed this, that yes, he didn't see anything, but Robin did. Something to keep in mind as well is that interrogating a kid is not like interrogating a grown-up. We have all heard and seen when people are interrogated and we can manipulate them and so on, but when doing this with kids, you have to remember to ask the correct questions. You have to remember not to ask, for instance, was he stabbed with a knife? And then the kid will say yes. But you have to ask them, how was he killed? You cannot ask any closed questions, because if you ask a closed question, they will probably agree with what you're saying. I saw this experiment that some people were doing. This has nothing to do with this case, just a side note. But I saw this where they talked to some kids in kindergarten, and they were like, oh, did you see the bunny outside? It was someone like a big Easter bunny or something. And one kid said, yeah, I saw it. It was green, and I don't know everything that they said, but there were never an Easter bunny. There were never anything outside, but all of the other kids started to get false memories and were like also remembering this one, and everyone said that, no, I saw it, I saw it, I saw it. Just a little side note, something I thought about. Anyway, as I said, interrogations with kids isn't the same as interrogating grown-ups. So what the investigators tried to do was to get a relationship with the children, and they also contacted a family therapist and then also kid psychologists. So the kids needed more than one interrogation, which experts now have said that when they have seen these interrogations, that they were very, very long and they were very, very frequent, which is a bad sign when it comes to dealing with kids at that age. Something to also remember is that the kids were interrogated with their stepmother the first time, but the second time and all of the other times their parents were never with them in the room that they were interrogated in. They were outside because, I don't know, the police probably told them that it was better of them if they weren't there or something, I'm assuming, or yeah, I don't know, but they were never in there. They were like outside only. In the documentary that I'm talking about, you can see some of the interrogations that they had, and Robin basically says that he knows who it is and it's someone at the school. So they take this yearbook and they give it to him and they say, point out the person who did this to Kevin, and he does, but he changes his mind all the time and he doesn't really know what he's talking about. It's very, very clear that he just doesn't really know, and the police eventually get very, very tired. I guess that they have this pressure from the public, so they are just really, really trying to work these boys. But eventually, like, the interrogations and everything doesn't really come of it, and they don't really know what to do. So basically, they get Robin to say that he and his brother did this. Never that they killed him, but that they pushed him into the water, because still, they don't know what happened to Kevin. They assume that he had drowned and died, because it's very harsh for a kid to imagine someone being strangled. I mean, you don't really know what that is when you are at that age. So what they do is they do a reconstruction. So they go down to the jetty and they take this doll and they put the doll and they say to Robin, do what you did to Kevin. And he basically doesn't really know what to do. He just stands there and he tries to take this doll and kind of push it to the water. And then the woman who's with him, which is a police officer, of course, is like, you also had a stick, do you remember that? So they are trying to get him to take this stick and press it against his neck. So he takes the stick. He still doesn't really know what to do with the stick, but he takes it and then he just goes up to Kevin, or, you know, the doll, and he tries to push him down with the stick into the water. And then they ask, okay, what did you do then? And he says, then I went home. He still cannot say what actually happened, because that is not the case. As I said, the body was moved and it was killed, being strangled, and then he also had some wounds on his genitals. When Christian is interrogated, it's basically the same thing. They try to get him to say that he had done something, but he can't really. He says that Robin pushed him in. It's just really back and forth. They're just kind of trying to put the blame on the other person, because they know I didn't do it, and if the police says that this happened, it has to be the other person, because it wasn't me. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to go to the last interrogation where the kids confessed. So what happened under this last interrogation is that this woman, who's called Ingrid Harrison, she is the one that have had all of these interrogations with the young boys, and she gets tired, she gets frustrated, she has probably a lot of pressure from the public. They want this case to be closed, they want this case to be dealt with. And during this last interrogation, she asks Robin, what happened with Kevin's neck. Previous to this, they have never discussed Kevin's neck. They have never talked about it. They have never, like, they don't even know what happened. And he's like, maybe he fell and hurt himself. Like, he doesn't know what to ask, or he doesn't know what to answer. And at that point, it doesn't matter whatever Robin says, because she has already ruined it. She has ruined that, because now he knows, and if he wasn't the murderer, would never know. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know what she wants to get at. Like, he doesn't know what happened to the neck because he didn't do it, and neither did his brother. So this Ingrid, she asks him over 100 times, over 100 times, what did you do with Kevin's neck? After she has asked him over 100 times what happened to his neck, and she said he had a wound here. He had a wound. She says, what did you do with him? Why did he have this wound there? What did you do to him? And he says, I didn't do anything, because he knows that he didn't do anything. But he said that Christian, his older brother, maybe have done something to him. And basically he doesn't know that she wants him to say that he took the stick and pressed it here. So what does he do? He says that Christian just pressed him here. Like, what's the English word for that? Pinched. Yeah, he pinched him here. That doesn't kill you. That doesn't give you that sort of wound. And I do also want to say something. If you don't know this, strangling someone is not as they show in movies. A lot of killers have struggled with this because it's not how you think it is. So if I want to strangle someone and I take my hands right here, or whatever, an object or whatever, and then you pass out, that is when you're dead in movies. But that's not the case. You have only passed out, but you can wake up 10 minutes after that. So how are these boys supposed to take this stick and hold it and press it against his neck for, I don't know how long you need to do it. I honestly don't know, but to the point where he passes out, and continue to press until he dies, which I'm assuming takes a lot of time. Then they start interrogating Christian, and Christian, they want to put the blame on him. They want to say that he was the one that killed him, and he understands that, but he refused to admit it. He refused to say anything. Going out to the media and saying that the boys had confessed was complete bullshit. It was complete bullshit. They never got any of the boys to confess. So I don't know what their problem was, but they never confessed, and they were wrongly accused, which is devastating, because if you think about it, they ruined this 5- and 7-year-old's life. I mean, not to mention the fact that this 4-year-old little boy, he got his life ruined, and there was another killer. Like, there's the real killer is loose. Who's the real killer? Well, we don't know, because they destroyed that investigation. They ruined it, and they knew it. So this reporter that I talked about, he actually had an interview with this Ingrid person, and he asked, like, what happened during the last interrogation? And she was like, well, they confessed and they could tell everything. Like, it was so clear that they were the ones who did it. They could say that I did this, Christian did this. They could tell the entire event. No, they couldn't. They didn't even confess. So he played a snap out of the interrogation, and she was like, oh, well, what I did there, that was not good. And yeah, maybe they weren't the one who did it. Come on, sister. And there were so many other people that's to blame for this that didn't take part in this documentary, which is kind of sad. Remember also that I said that they had found his body, Kevin's body, 30 meters from where he was killed. And there was someone, like a specialist, like an expert, who said that there is no way that 2 young boys can take a 4-year-old's body and drag it to this next location 30 meters away without it having any marks. He didn't have any marks on his body that he was traced. Nothing. Something as well to mention, because maybe you're wondering, like, where were the parents? After the first interrogation, the stepmom actually had to go into a psych ward because she was destroyed. And then when the father actually realized that his boys might be responsible, he also got into the psych ward. What is it called? Like, he had to go to a mental hospital. I don't really know the exact term of it, but you know what I mean anyway. Like, they were not in a good state of mind. They were feeling so bad, and I feel so bad for them, because they thought that they did everything that they could for their children, and that they were doing the right thing. And they also thought that, of course not, the police is gonna trick them or do something this horrible, because they have authority, like they are supposed to be the good guys. There's just so much more information that I wish that I could cover, but it's just gonna be like too long of a video, and I don't want to do it. But I do actually recommend you guys to go ahead and watch the documentary about this, because it's such an interesting case. So another thing I want to take up is that the boys actually had an alibi. The boys or the family had a family over for dinner, and then during the night they went out fishing. They tried to get this other family to say that they weren't with the children and that they weren't with the family. But they were like, well, we were there. They had nothing to lose. They didn't know that they suspected that the 2 young boys had done it, but they were like, no, we were with them all the time. They also were playing with the family's 10-year-old boy, and his mom had told him, like, you need to look after these boys because you are the oldest person here. So you need to take care of them and don't let them out of your sight. And they were there all the time. Like, the parents of the family even saw the young boys. So how could they just ignore their alibi? They had a strong alibi. Like, nothing could budge it. So how could these young boys have done this crime? It's insane. Like, how? If the boys were of legal age to be convicted, it would never have gone to trial, because you can never go to trial if someone has that strong of an alibi and you don't have any proof or anything. There were people who had seen them. There were people who had seen them on the boat fishing. Like, there were so many other people, and so many people said that no, they couldn't have done this. Like, no, they were with us, or we saw them at that time, and just X, Y, and Z and so on. But they were like, no, we are determined to close this case. And that's what they did. They closed the case, but they weren't really interested in the truth. Their interest was just in closing the case, and that's horrible. I am going to put on lashes and then also take out the dogs, and then I am going to tell you what happened after this, what good has come of it, and what's new in this case, and maybe they have caught the killer. So after the documentary was published to the people and everyone had seen it, 2017 this came out, so 19 years after the murder, people were outraged, which is totally understandable. People were so mad at the police. They were just so stunned, like, how could this happen? Like, how could 2 innocent small little children be blamed for this horrible crime? Like, there was just so many questions been raised and so much anger. And honestly, like, seeing how the kids, or now the grown men, reacted to some of the interrogations, because obviously they saw them on tape and everything, like, they started crying and being so sad that this was how the police treated them. Because they basically, I didn't say this before, but they basically did threatened them, like if they didn't do what they wanted to, like if the boys didn't say what the police wanted to. And then they also rewarded them if they said anything that they wanted them to say. So none of this was credible. And if you were to see the tapes with the young boys, you would see that you can't trust them. Like when Robin is interrogated the first time, he says, knife to the stomach. How do you kill someone? You take a knife and you put it to the stomach. There were never a knife in the picture, never, ever. And there was nothing done with his stomach. This is his neck, and then this is the stomach. Okay, down here, you can't really see it, but I mean, they're not close. Oh, yeah, I don't really get it. But of course, the people were outraged, and some of the police officers were like, okay, we fucked up, which they did. And I'm so happy that they at least can admit that, because it would be even worse if they were like, oh, what do you mean? We didn't do anything wrong. I would be so disgusted by that. Someone that worked on the case was like, they didn't bring everything up, and he was just, I don't know, a very disgusting person. Some of the people working on the case was just like really, you know. Anyway, so after this, what happened was that they started to look into the case again. So 2018, they started to look into the case again. And also the two boys that were now grown men, Robin and Christian, were now no longer suspects. They had been cleared. So the police let them go, and that must have been such a victory for them. Like, oh my God, this is over for them. They are no longer having to be blamed for this case. You know, after this, by the way, the dad said to the reporters that, or the journalist in the documentary, that after this, the psychiatric ward or whatever took them in. So they took the entire family in, and they even tried to put Christian in another family so that he would live in another family. And this breaks my heart, because no one wanted him. I'm really happy that no one wanted him so that he could grow up with his family. But it's just crazy that they were like, okay, no, it's better for you to not be here. Like, oh, disgusting. But they were cleared, and now they looked into the case again. And they basically said that it could have been an accident, that Kevin was outside playing by the jetty. No, by the pallets. I think that they're called pallets. That he was out playing with that, and then they kind of fell over him, and then kind of smushed him, and that is how he died. But that just leaves so many other questions, like how, because this is obviously the theories now, that is just waking up so many new questions. Like, how could he have died there, and then he was found at another place, like 30 meters from that place? How did that happen? If that is what the police are going for, how could he have been moved? And they said that maybe someone found him, tried to resuscitate him, and it didn't work, and they left him there. I don't know, like that theory doesn't seem very strong in my opinion. But we do have an expert in Sweden. If you are Swedish, you know who this is. It's Leif GW Persson, and he has said that the police has basically botched this entire investigation, but that he thinks that he knows who did it. Because before these two boys came into the picture, they actually closed in on a 13-year-old boy and his friend. They tried to talk to him, and they were basically on him very much. If I'm just gonna assume, I think that this is the same person that Leif GW Persson is talking about. So he said 9 months after, I'm looking at some of my notes, but it says like this: 9 months after Kevin's death, they arrested a 13-year-old boy because he was caught while he was raping a 3-year-old boy. This rape was near the location where they found Kevin. So that is why he is now thinking that maybe that 13-year-old had something to do with it. Which honestly could be quite true. The police haven't wanted to say that if he's if they are looking into this boy or not, so we don't really know. Another thing that this expert said was that 93, if you remember, or if you have heard about the case about James Bulger, this happened in England 1993, and they actually came to Sweden. The investigators that handled the James Bulger case actually came to Sweden. And if you've never heard about that case, I'm just gonna drag it really quick. There were two 10-year-olds who killed a 2-year-old little boy. And they actually came to Sweden and held conferences and talked about the case and so on. So maybe that is why they started to suspect children, because maybe they were like, oh my god, kids are starting to kill kids or something. I don't really know. But if we're just gonna talk really quick about what's gonna happen now. So the kids, or the young men now, are off, like they have nothing to do with the case anymore. Hopefully the young men will get something out of this, and by that I'm saying money, because they have lived a very close life. Their girlfriends never knew that they were accused of this. Their best friends never knew that they were accused of this. They just held it to themselves, and I can imagine that that kind of ate them up inside, and that is something that they had to live with, which is just insane. The boys have been beat up, like it's just been crazy for them. Even now, when this has happened, there's still people that's in doubt and think that they are guilty, which has made people, like the day, I think it was the day after they got off, like when they said that they have nothing to do with this. The day after that, Robin actually got beat up. He was really badly injured, which is just crazy. So hopefully the policemen that were leading this investigation will get some sort of punishment, and hopefully the boys can get some sort of money or something. But that is all that I have for this case, and I have struggled today. I have been interrupted a zillion times, and it's been really hard to do this case while doing my makeup, but still just talking about this, it's been really hard. So hopefully it ended up being some sort of like a good video, but if it wasn't, I do apologize. I'll see when I edit this footage, of course, how it was, but as of right now, I feel like this was a really bad video, and I do apologize for that. But hopefully I'll get better with time if I end up doing it again. That was all from me today. Like the video if you liked it, dislike the video if you didn't like it. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.